Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Easterseals President and CEO, Kendra Davenport.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Welcome everyone to Easterseals' inaugural Policy and Partnership Forum. We are so glad you're here, and it's really a treat to see all of you. Easterseals is leading the way to full equity, inclusion, and access for people with disabilities, veterans, and older adults, as well as their families and communities nationwide. It's exciting to have a room filled with individuals who share our purpose, staff and volunteer leaders from Easterseals' network of affiliates, national disability advocates, leaders from the Biden-Harris administration, national disability veterans and aging organizations, corporate and foundation leaders. We are so glad you are here. Before we begin today's program, I want to acknowledge an important member of the disability community who's no longer with us. Her unexpected death in March left us all at a loss. Judy Heumann devoted her life to advocating on behalf of people with disabilities. Judy was a true force to be reckoned with, and her legacy will endure for generations to come. I'd like us to take a moment and celebrate all she did throughout her life to fight and defend the rights of the disabled.
We will always remember you, Judy Heumann, activist, leader, advocate, Oscar nominee.
I wasn't quite expected for how much of a badass you would be.
The fight you started in the 1970s laid the groundwork for disability rights and what became the Americans with Disabilities Act.
We as disabled people need to band together, speak out against oppression or discrimination against anyone, and that needs to be the norm.
As the mother of the Disability Pride movement, your work cemented that we are not the problem. We are the people who must drive change. We will continue that fight for justice.
Quoting activist Lily Lanoff, your memory is a blessing. It is a call to action. It is a part of the why behind so much of our success. Thank you, Judy Heumann.
Thank you, Judy, indeed. I'd like to thank all of you again for being here today. Your presence affirms your support of the 61 million Americans who identify as being disabled. And it also affirms your belief in achieving greater equity, inclusion, and accessibility so that people with disabilities can lead full, productive, fulfilling lives. Easterseals welcomes the opportunity to work with all of you now and well into the future. Yesterday, Easterseals leaders and advocates from across the country met with legislators on Capitol Hill to ensure that policies and programs at the federal, state, and local levels support the needs of people with disabilities, families, and communities. During these legislative visits, we shared Easterseals' State of Disability Equity and Access Report and held a congressional briefing to release the research which highlights the current state of equity and inclusion for people with disabilities in key social health determinants, including education, employment, healthcare, and transportation. Published in collaboration, and this is a mouthful, with the Coelho Center for Disability Law, Policy, and Innovation at Loyola Marymount University Law School, the report is designed to benchmark future progress in achieving civil rights for the disability community and to inform policies and programs moving forward which guarantee that people with disabilities can fully participate in their communities and in society at large. Easterseals intends to leverage the report to call attention to the progress that has been made in advancing equity and access for people with disabilities, from the signing of the American Disabilities Act nearly 33 years ago to the present, and also to call attention to the fact that there is much left for us to do as a nation to make full inclusion for people with disabilities a reality in society. The passage of the American Disabilities Act created much-needed civil rights protections for disabled people, and it guaranteed equal opportunity in public accommodations, employment, and transportation. But the world and our society have evolved since 1990, and crucial modifications to the ADA are necessary to create greater opportunities for employment, to create a clear path to more equitable education, and to ensure that disabled people are afforded equal access to transportation. As of today, none of those rights is fully guaranteed to anyone with a disability. What makes that fact so shocking and so concerning is that most of us in this room will become disabled in our lifetime. 25% of the people who are 20 years old today will become disabled by their 67th birthday. 48 million Americans have some type of hearing loss. Over 7 million people in the United States have some form of visual disability, and more than 1 million Americans are legally blind. 16% of people have some difficulties with physical functions, and about 8 million Americans have an intellectual disability. Nearly 1/4 of the American population is disabled, and yet only 18% of disabled Americans are employed. We need to change that. To change that, we must do more to reduce the stigmatization around disability that prevents companies from embracing people with disabilities and hiring them. And we need to eliminate additional barriers to employment that impede disabled people from securing good jobs. One such barrier is transportation. If accessible transportation is not available to someone with a disability, their chances of enjoying meaningful employment, of receiving regular health care, of attending school, or simply visiting their family and friends are dramatically reduced or completely eliminated. Transportation is a very important social health determinant, and yet it's often overlooked. Today we're going to discuss the importance of employment, and the importance of transportation to disabled people. Easterseals is concerned about the gaps and the impediments and the lack of access that at a minimum diminish the quality of life for people with disabilities, or worse, create poverty and depression, and fuel loneliness and discrimination that hold disabled people back. To attract and cultivate support and awareness necessary to bring about change, we published the Easterseals State of Disability, Equity, and Access Report, and couldn't give it a longer name. We are really grateful to Voya Financial for seeing the intrinsic value in the creation of such a report, as it now serves as the cornerstone in the foundation we hope to build with all of you. Together, we want to harness the expertise, the knowledge, and the experience all of you bring to the fore, and become a catalyst for collaboration, so that together, through dialogue and decisive action, we may ensure that life in the United States for people with disabilities is more equitable, inclusive, and accessible. In the words of Charles Darwin, it is the long history of mankind that those who learn to collaborate and improvise more effectively have prevailed. I'm not only confident that together we will prevail, I'm incredibly enthusiastically optimistic. And now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to our moderator, Simone Sanders Townsend, an author, a seasoned Democratic strategist, and host of her own show, Simone, on MSNBC and MSNBC Peacock. When I learned that Simone had graciously agreed to moderate today our panel discussions, I was thrilled. Because as an MSNBC News junkie who never sleeps and watches constantly, I have followed her meteoric rise at MSNBC, and I've admired the zeal with which she champions equity and inclusion and calls out discrimination. I really can't think of a better moderator. So please join me in welcoming Simone Sanders Townsend.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I am so excited to be here today with all of you. Leaders, we got service providers in the room, change makers. Everybody is on one accord here. Everyone in this room is focused on advancing equity and access for for people with disabilities. And I am just so happy to be here first and foremost with my Comcast family. I know Juan and Tracy are both here. Juan, who is a board member, a national board member for Easterseals, and Tracy, who is committed to doing this work. And Comcast and Easterseals have really entered into an amazing partnership to provide key funds for the work that Easterseals is doing. So I'm as proud as a peacock to be here today to talk about that work. I'm also happy to be here with some members of the Biden administration who are focused on improving opportunities and well-being for all Americans. So are y'all ready to get to it? Are you ready to get to it? Okay, now, I want to set the stage a little bit. So it's my understanding that in his first year of office, President Biden issued an executive order. I do believe that I was there. And the executive order said this. It said the federal government must be a model for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, DEIA. All right, so we are going to engage in some conversation about this. And I can't think of two better people to have this conversation with. First, I'd like to welcome to the stage Taryn M. Williams, the Assistant Secretary for Disability Employment Policy at the U.S. Department of Labor. Give it up for Taryn. And next, but certainly not least, Kelly Buckland, Disability Officer in the Office of the Assistant Secretary on Policy at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Thank you both for being here. This is going to be fabulous. Okay, Assistant Secretary Williams, I want to start with you because one of the Biden administration's stated goals announced on the anniversary in 2022 on the anniversary of the ADA was to provide significant investments to expand the competitive integrated employment program. So where are we on that progress?
Yep.
Okay, what does significant investment mean? Sounds great. Give me a specific.
Got it. Well, hello everyone. I am so excited to be here. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Taryn McKenzie Williams. I have the pleasure of serving as Assistant Secretary for Disability Employment Policy. And in that role, I lead our Office of Disability Employment Policy within the U.S. Department of Labor. And we are a small sub-cabinet level agency focused to work across policies, systems, agencies, employers, both private sector and public sector, to advance the employment of people with disabilities. And I want to be very deliberate in how I talk about this, because when we talk about advancing employment, we're talking about both the number of people with disabilities who are employed, but also the quality of that employment. And for us at the Department of Labor, quality means competitive, integrated employment. It means family-sustaining wages. And so foremost on our minds is advancing the Biden-Harris commitment to CIE, as so much of the work that you all do. And the way that we're doing that work is in partnership with our other agencies at the Department of Labor, including the Wage and Hour Division. We've been working with the Departments of Social Security, Health and Human Services, Education, working with states and providers, so national and local, to help them in transforming their models from sub-minimum wage into competitive integrated employment. And I'll say one quick thing about this, because I could talk about this all day, and I know we don't have all that time, but for us, the theory of change is not for us as a federal agency to come in and tell you, you need to change your business model. We know that won't work. What we do know, and what I know all of you around this room know, is that the landscape is shifting, and it's shifting very quickly. Providers are already moving, states are already moving in the direction of advancing CIE. And so we partner with providers who have already begun that transformation, and then they mentor other local providers to transform their business models. And we have amongst our partners, Source America, Access, and so many others, because we know that we need to be in collaboration with you to get this done and to meet the Biden administration's promise on this. So I'll stop there. I could go on.
You could go on. You could go on. Assistant Secretary Williams, I do think there's COVID, right?
Yep.
We talk about being post-COVID nowadays, and frankly, I don't necessarily believe that is true. People are still dying in this country every day from COVID-19. But one of the things that COVID brought us was a new era of work patterns. particularly using technologies, and I think a lot of those technologies help level the playing field for people with disabilities. You talked about the employment piece here, and I want you to give us some insight on that employment, because the employment rate for people with disabilities, it does still pale in comparison with their non-disabled peers. And so how does the Department of Labor work with employers to help create more job opportunities specifically for people with disabilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So COVID has been transformative for us all, and you will likely never hear me say that COVID is over. I will say that we are emerging from the pandemic. I will say that we are constantly learning and evolving, as are our workplaces, as a result of the last 3 years, but I would not say it's over. And part of the reason why I wouldn't say it's over is because there are so many people with disabilities who are still living in fear, who are still worried about what the new workplace of the future will look like and the extent to which that workplace will welcome them. There has been promising trends over the last few years. We have seen how, and I say this as someone with a non-apparent disability, where we've had employers who have all of a sudden said, you know what, we will extend those accommodations to you. We will make that technology available to you. We will ensure that you can have workplace flexibility. All of a sudden, around the globe, workplaces transformed, and we want to leverage that, and we think employers are leveraging that, and we see that in the numbers. We see that in the promise of the disability employment gap starting to close. But we also hear, and I read the newspapers, I mean, we're in the press club, we hear this conversation about returning to normal. We hear a desire to get back in the workplace, and make no mistake, I understand the economic trends that drive that desire to be back in the workplace. But I don't want our rush to get back to normal to be at the expense of the gains that we've seen in disability employment. So part of the work that we do in my agency, part of the work that we do across the Department of Labor, is ensuring that what we've learned over the last few years, that does not go to waste, and that employers are leveraging those technologies and the way we meet and collaborate today and bringing that into the future. But we've got work to do, because that pressure is on to go back to the office.
One last COVID question for you. People with disabilities who could be experiencing long COVID, are there additional protections that are now being extended to them, resources, maybe long-term support? I'm thinking of including mental health support and mental health services.
Yeah, so a couple messages on long COVID that I tell any employer, employee, or anyone who's facing the lingering effects of a COVID infection. One, long COVID is real. Okay, like foremost, long COVID is real. And I wish I didn't have to start there, but I know for far too many employees and individuals who are grappling with a new diagnosis, they feel that they're not validated. They feel that they're gaslighted about what they're experiencing. So foremost, long COVID is real, and there are accommodations that are available to you under the ADA. And while the diagnosis itself might be new, while the condition itself might be new, the associated symptoms of long COVID are something that we as a community and we as a field have been working on for years. My agency runs something called the Job Accommodation Network. It is a one-stop shop of free, confidential expertise related to accommodations. I use it as an employee myself. I've used it as a manager. So individuals who are experiencing headaches, individuals who are experiencing brain fog, individuals who live with reactive arthritis, there are accommodations that can support you as you grapple with the very real effects of long COVID. And one other thing I'll note is that we understand that for us, the goal, particularly at DOL, is to ensure that you can stay connected to your workplace. We know that you've invested in your careers. We want folks to be able to thrive economically and be fully integrated into their communities. But there are also resources available throughout the federal government, including with HHS and SSA, because sometimes work may not be an option, either in the temporary or the long term. So we have plenty of resources available. We continue to work with a number of agencies to support those confronting long COVID, and we will be in this fight for years to come.
Advisor Buckland, for people that don't know, again, you are the disability advisor for the Office of the Assistant Secretary on Policy at the U.S. Department of Transportation. That's important, folks, because
Yes, it is.
when we talk about what is happening with the transportation industry, which, I mean, frankly, we have all, they've just been in the news. Y'all been busy over these last couple months, if just to say a little bit. And when we talk about what's happening with the transportation industry, I want to start with an initiative that you all established last year. It was the Airline Passengers with Disabilities Bill of Rights. Can you speak to the intent of this initiative, and then just also how the Department of Transportation is working to ensure it is actually adopted across the board?
Yeah, first let me just say hi. I'm glad to be here with all of you. Particularly happy to be here with my good friend Taryn.
We go way back.
Yeah, we've been busy. We're spending money like crazy. I never really did aspire to be a Fed. This is my first federal position, and but I aspired to this one, and am really excited to be in this position because transportation plays such a huge role in people's lives, as the introduction said. Like it affects every piece of your life. So it's really I'm really happy to be here during this time when we have money, and but I will say the Passengers Bill of Rights is not new. Those are rights that people already had in the Air Carrier Access Act. So that doesn't create anything new. What it's really intended to do is tell people about their rights, because a lot of people don't know, and familiarize them with their rights, and then help them become advocates for their own rights when they're flying on airplanes, because frankly, for people with disabilities, it's become unsafe and dangerous to even try to board an airplane. People are being hospitalized just trying to get to an airplane or board an airplane, and their equipment is like we're damaging tens of thousands of wheelchairs every year. The airlines are either damaging, losing, or completely destroying those thousands of wheelchairs. Like I think the figure is somewhere around 6 or 7 chairs a day. So.
I'm sorry, what now? Can we just, these numbers, what are the numbers again? Because this is, it's someone's wheelchair it is an essential, we talked about essential workers during COVID. This is an essential item. Thousands, how many would you say a day are being damaged?
I think it's something like eight chairs a day.
8 chairs a day.
Between 6 and 8.
How then does the Bill of Rights, if you will, which I think is an important point to note, that this is something that it's not new. It is something that it is already, these are rights that folks have that they just didn't know about. So this is really an education initiative. How has this initiative been received by the airlines and by the disability community writ large?
Well, the Bill of Rights was actually a recommendation that came out of the advisory committee. And the advisory committee includes both advocates and the airlines. They put this forward. So the department just really did what the advisory committee asked us to do. The real fix to this problem, though, well, there's a few fixes. One is we need to require that the airlines aren't hurting people when they transfer them into the other chairs. And we need to make damaging a wheelchair a per se violation. So if you damage a wheelchair, you just violated the Air Carrier Access Act. Currently, that's not the way it works. So we're initiating a rule that will do both of those things. It will require that they provide training to the people who are providing these services. That rule is currently being written. And then a big announcement, you guys, not yesterday, day before yesterday, the final rule on accessible bathrooms on single aisle aircraft was just sent to OMB. So it's the final rule. As soon as OMB is done with it, I think they have about 90 days to do what they will, which is an interagency review, but then it will become final rule. So we're hoping it will be final sometime in June or July.
Now, Advisor Buckland, what I have learned, and when we're in the rooms, we just gave them some federal government policy speak. Break down for people what this final rule means, because this is a huge deal, a very big deal.
So this was actually something that was negotiated back in 2016. The airlines made a deal with the advocates that they would have 20 years to have accessible bathrooms on airplanes with single aisles. They're already required to have accessible bathrooms on planes that have 2 aisles. So wide body jets are already required, but like the 737 has become a long haul airplane now. Some of them are actually being used for international flights. So this would extend now to accessible bathrooms to single aisle aircraft. The rule shortened the time period considerably, luckily, and it also requires them to have an onboard wheelchair that people can use to get to the restroom. But then the other fix to this really is that people be able to fly in their own wheelchairs. And the department is currently conducting research right now on how we can make that happen safely. So the FAA is already engaged in doing research on making flight so that you can fly in your own wheelchair, which means that your chair wouldn't get damaged and you wouldn't get hurt because you wouldn't be getting out of your chair. There will still be some people who choose to do that, but it would no longer be a requirement, because right now airplanes are the only mode of transportation where you have to get out of your wheelchair to ride. Like you just ride your wheelchair into a bus or on a boat or on a train, but planes you can't do that. So that we're going to change that and make it like all the other forms of transportation.
Now, I've heard that there is renewed attention, interest, and maybe some legislative action around the Air Carrier Access Act. So is this related to that? What is at stake here?
No, those are things already under way. So the Air Carrier Access Act, there's a lot of renewed attention to that because there's still a lot more to do. Private right of action is one of the things that's being discussed in the new reauthorization of the FAA. Another thing is research on ongoing research on making flight more accessible. So, yeah, there's a lot of other things that still need to occur, even given the stuff that we're currently working on. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be happening in the future. And that includes like the accommodations for other types of disabilities. Like there's no accessible in-flight communications right now. So when the pilot gives an announcement over the airplane speaker, deaf people don't have access to that, or hearing impaired don't have access either. We got over 400 complaints last year on service animals being denied on airplanes. So blind people are having real trouble getting their service animals on airplanes, as well as other people with disabilities who use service animals. But yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done.
A lot of work to be done. In the time that we have left, and I'm going to start with you, Advisor Buckland, we've talked about a number of the things that are holding us back, a number of the challenges, the work that is still yet to be done. If I ask you to think about some of the bright spots for increasing access for people with disabilities, what would some of those bright spots be?
Well, the infrastructure bill is, we're spending trillions of dollars to rebuild everything, and we're going to do it accessible this time. We're replacing every single Amtrak train. Every car is going to be replaced. Just met with Amtrak this week on the starting designs of the long-haul trains to make them accessible. We've already done that for the regional trains, and they still have to be built, they still have to be put on the track, so it's still going to be 2 or 3, 4 years before we start to see them on the rails. But Amtrak has really stepped up. That's a real bright spot, I think. Train travel is going to become much, much better. And the All Stations Accessibility Program that Senator Duckworth got through, we just granted all those awards out, so the rail stations are being brought up to ADA standards. So rail and air travel is really going to go through. But just everything we're building, we're going to make sure it's happening. Then the other thing, Karen and I were talking about this around employment is we're building into all those notice of federal funding opportunity requirement under 503, the federal contractors and their subcontractors are required to hire a goal of 7% of their workforce needs to be people with disabilities. So that's going to be in every federal contract under bill too, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. So anyway, so employment's going to hopefully change a great deal under the bill.
Yeah. Assistant Secretary Williams, sounds like a bright spot. What innovations are pushing us forward as it relates to employment?
Well, Kelly already talked about one. I just want to put a finer point on that. For the job creation that's happening in the communities across the nation and in our territories, we are ensuring that when we talk about creating jobs, that we're including people with disabilities in those jobs. And that starts with holding federal agencies accountable as they're flowing those dollars out to local communities, that people with disabilities are part of that equation. So I'm very excited about that. And I also already talked about another one, which is the way in which we work looks different. Workplace flexibility, our expectations around it, our expectations around technology, that has transformed. It's opened up the world in terms of how people work and ensuring that people with disabilities are part of the recruitment pool. They're getting hired. We're talking about retention and advancement in ways that, frankly, we've been at this for some time, and it's a different conversation today. So I am very excited about that. We still have a lot of work to do, though, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so glad to look out in this room. We were trying to figure out the last time we were in this space together, and it's just so gratifying to see advocates here, that you were up on the Hill, that you're talking to your members about your commitment to disability employment, your commitment to equity and access. So I can't thank all of you enough for the work that you do in your states.
I think that the Assistant Secretary has a future in television, because she just transitioned very well to our next panel. It was kind of scary. Advisor Buckland, Assistant Secretary Williams, thank you both very, very much for kicking us off today, but also holding us accountable, letting us know how far we have come, how much work there is still left to do, but giving us a little inspiration in the process. We appreciate your time. Please give us a round of applause. All right, yes. Yep. I don't know about you, but I learned a little bit in this panel discussion, and that is what we are. I'm making sure I need to slide to the right over here, the cha-cha slide. So we started talking about transportation this morning, which I think is transportation and employment from the federal government's perspective, what the federal government is doing to improve access, to improve employment, how the federal government is providing resources to providers and entities and employers and just assistance, because some of this is just education to airline industries. Now we're going to transition to talk a little bit about inclusion in the workplace. And we have some amazing panelists that are gonna take us and discuss that, because, and the Assistant Secretary, she made that seamless transition. She talked about, when we talk about jobs for people with disabilities, it is not just ensuring that there is a job, that the quality of the job, but inclusion. Okay, inclusion is very important. A mentor of mine used to say, diversity is you being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. Yes. And I think, yes. And I think we have all, I think there are many of us in this room that have been invited to a party but never been asked to dance. Invited to the party, but there is not where the table where the decisions are being made. The folks who are closest to the issue are, in fact, not engaged and involved in the decision making. Well, that's why we're going to talk about disability inclusion in the workplace and why that's a powerful win for all. So I want to introduce our panelists. First, Emily Liddell, please come to the stage. Emily is a disability advocate and author of Demystifying Disability, and she is a social media influencer. I am very much so hoping that she tags me today. Thank you for being here, Emily. Mark Renault, please give him a round of applause. He is the Director of Disability and Leave Service Delivery for Amazon. Yes, Juan Otero, he is the Senior Vice President, give Juan a round of applause, of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity at Comcast NBC Universal. Carlos Terrazas is here. Carlos is the Global Disability Inclusion Leader at McDonald's. There we go. Crystal Odom McKinney. Give Crystal a round of applause for this fabulous yellow suit, honey. Crystal is the National Director of Senior Community Services Employment Program at Easterseals. Give our good panel a round of applause. All right, so when it comes to employment and disability inclusion, I think it's safe to say we're in good company out here. So welcome, and thank you all for joining us. I want to start with this month's job report. Let's set the stage. The United States Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that the labor force participation rate for people with disabilities, talking about folks ages 16 to 64, increased from 37.8% in March to 40.2% in March. Okay, so that's from March 22 to March 23. That's nearly 3 percentage points, folks. For people without disabilities, again, ages 16 to 64, the labor force participation rate, it also increased from 77.2% to 77.6% over the last year. So those are the numbers. Hearing the numbers, knowing that there's like, what, that's about a 38% difference between workforce participation. I mean, 37.8% is very different than 72.2, okay? So that's about a 38% difference between workforce participation for people with disabilities and people without. How does the disability community and frankly the employer community continue to make progress and bridge that gap? I'm gonna start with my companies first. So tell us about Amazon. What is Amazon doing to bridge the gap?
We're trying. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here, so thanks everybody. And this is super exciting. We work very closely with Easterseals. Really happy to be here. So it's really about doing the hard work. I firmly believe that creating accessible jobs is the way to do it. And so we have really ambitious goals to create jobs that are fully accessible from day one. We have a team focused on helping people get to their first day, and so their first day is accessible, and they have accommodations that they might need. They're prepared for the job. It's called the Applicant and Candidate Accommodations Team. It's not just about creating the accessible jobs. You also have to make sure that they're successful when they are at the company, and that's a little bit of culture change. So we do things like manager training. We have, like I said, very ambitious accessibility goals to make sure all of our tools are accessible for people with disabilities. So if you think about it, when you join a company, it's not just the Microsoft Outlook that you might use. There's hundreds of tools. We have over 700 tools that an employee might use when they're actually on the job, from their internal communication system. If you're in a fulfillment center, you might use a little gadget that you walk around with, and that might not be accessible. So we've been working really hard on making all those things accessible and creating opportunities across the board.
Carlos, what about McDonald's? How is McDonald's working to bridge the gap? Along the lines, some of the things that Mark talked about. The model of McDonald's is different, whether we're talking on the corporate side or we're talking about in the actual restaurants across the country.
Well, again, just like Mark said, I'm very happy to be here, and thanks for having me. Just to emphasize, McDonald's has always done a great job at this space. From a restaurant crew, we typically employ people with disabilities. The challenging part is that our franchisees are the ones who are doing this work behind the scenes, and from a corporate level, we get notified or are aware of this through different newsrooms, articles, etc. But we have really emphasized disability inclusion at a corporate job type of perspective. We've launched a new way of accommodating our employees or our applicants as well, to make sure that the employee or the candidacy experience is up to par. We've launched, a culture where, we welcome people with disabilities through our employee business network called the Disability Inclusion Group. And then now we're proactively, setting stages with like local rehab offices in our corporate stores to understand what kind of talent is available and wants to work at a restaurant, and then embarking on that partnership to ensure that we're hitting that target too.
Juan, what about Comcast? Because I think when people think about Comcast, yes, there's the corporate side of it, but when I think about Comcast, I think about the folks who are out in communities all over the country who are repairing telephone poles and power lines. Yeah. How are you all working to bridge the gap there to make that accessible?
Yeah, and those are the employees during the pandemic that allowed for the virtual work to occur. So our lives, and I would imagine folks in this room, we were largely impacted, but they were out there every day, risking their lives with COVID, which I agree with the people has not gone away, and continue to do that. So look, I think I agree with my colleagues in terms of the tools, the accessibilities, what those pieces are, but for us, it's about a culture look at. I mean, really focusing on culture, because we've got to be rigidly flexible as we look at the PWD community writ large. I think all too often, corporate America does get siloed. So what we've done is have this sort of constant refresh. And it may sound like basic table stakes, but redoing our self-ID campaign. I know our numbers are not right in terms of people who are either caregivers or people with disabilities, and for stigmas that I think everybody knows because they're afraid about progress or what this means. So we've gone back, put a lot of money into that because we have to constantly be having this conversation as the dimensions of diversity change. And I think, Mark, to your point, it's like, how do we have that with the leadership? How do we have that? Again, we're a very big decentralized company. We've got showrunners, we've got people who are putting cable. How do we have that same message coming from headquarters, from the top down, about this is a critical part of our DE&I journey, and we have to have that comfort level where people can come forward. We also want to have the sanctity and the sanity around the data of our current population, which, again, I am, as my colleagues can attest, always skeptical about, okay, are folks really identifying themselves? That's how we get to the better benefits. That's how we figure out what can we do for the caregiver community, because I think it's all well-intentioned, but unless you're constantly having that conversation, and the accommodations, the legal, yeah, I got it, but we all have to be better than what the baseline standard is if we're truly going to embrace a true DE&I vision for the largest, underrepresented population on the planet.
Emily, I saw you shaking your head while Juan was speaking. I mean, he talked about the data. There was a slight increase, right, in the reported workforce participation by people with disabilities, but that's a number that's been stagnant for a long time. So just some of your thoughts, Emily? I mean, I guess I would also wonder, why do you think the increase came about at this time? We're talking about the difference between 2022, 2023. Is it because an increase in remote work? Is it something else? Is it sustainable?
So I think that a lot of the stagnation comes from the fact that we have been socialized to think about disability as being a negative, so we don't recognize it as something that we celebrate as part of a person. We think of it as something that is a hindrance to how someone performs in the workplace. We expect that people will adapt to workplaces rather than creating a culture where the workplace is adaptable for everybody. And so I think
Say it again, Emily. Hold on. I don't want the people to miss that one. I don't want people to miss that. Say that again.
So we create workplaces where we expect people to adapt to the workplace rather than workplaces being adaptable for everyone. And I think that points to the key problem that we have with this stagnation. Now, as we move forward, a lot of companies are coming out of the woodwork and they're saying we're going to create special initiatives to hire disabled people. It's a special project right now. It's not yet something that we're doing across our culture, across our company. And so I think that is what is leading to some of the increase, but I think that overall we have not yet reached a point where it is common practice from the outset of recruitment and onboarding to look at disability as a key part of what makes someone an asset to a company and a key part of what makes someone a whole human being. And as for your question about the pandemic, I absolutely think that there's something to do with the fact that we switched to virtual, and yet people with disabilities have been asking for that for so long. We had this idea, we started this trend, and then everybody else just jumped on it during the pandemic.
That's right.
And if I'm being honest,
be honest. No, this is absolutely very true. Oftentimes, I mean, it wasn't until folks whom it wasn't until a overwhelming number of people across America were put in a position to where remote work was beneficial to them as well, that it became, and frankly, we were forced into it. It was not safe. It wasn't safe to be in a workplace. We didn't know how to keep folks safe. But your point about that the disability community had been advocating for this for a long time is absolutely very true.
100%, and I'll just wrap up by saying that this number that we're looking to increase will ultimately increase workforce participation rate for everybody, because we're creating what I call virtual curb cuts. So not everybody can get up and down a curb, but if you have a curb cut, suddenly you've created access for everybody, whether you're using a mobility device, whether you're on a skateboard, pushing a stroller. The same thing is true if you are creating virtual curb cuts by offering remote work options. Suddenly everybody is able to access work in a way that they weren't before. And that's how we're gonna see those numbers grow when we create those virtual curb cuts.
Absolutely.
Crystal, let's stay on this particular point, because you hear from folks all across the country, right, and the work that you all are doing, and you have some businesses that are like, oh, the remote work has hurt our businesses, and we need people to physically come back to work and be in the office. We can't continue to have so many remote work options. But then we have a conversation like we're having right here, whereas with remote work, at least, I mean, given COVID, we have the numbers, a 3% increase, and the remote work technology and flexibility has had something to do with that. And so how do you balance these conversations, and like what are you hearing as you all are engaging in your work?
Yes, thank you. We're definitely hearing more as we've pivoted, and we continue to pivot and navigate through the pandemic as it relates to working from home and living remotely and working remotely. But we also see the need with businesses, and as we interact with businesses, such as the businesses and our friends, as we call them now, from my left to my right, we see more of the need to be adjusting. And what we want to do is ensure that we're working with our businesses, their bottom line, and also understanding that we can have a seat at the table, whether it's in the office or whether it's in a different setting, in a different accommodation. What's important is what we bring to the plate. What's important is that we can all live and ultimately live as humans as we are, whether it's remote virtual work or it's a traditional type of place of employment. So we want to get to that aspect, and we definitely want to turn the corner so that we can ultimately be in that environment where we are living as humans and working together in that space, and taking away these labels and just being who we are.
Do you find that stigma still plays a role at work and in workplaces? And if so, how can we accelerate pushing past that to really get to the place that you just discussed, where we are seeing people as people?
Definitely more conversations, more open conversations about how we live and what we do. It should be okay and to be in a platform and to have a conversation, especially in the workplace, about your needs, whether it's any type of ism. Being able to talk about that freely and discuss that and discuss options. And let's ride that journey together as we navigate through the ups and the downs. But again, really important to understand about where we are with those isms and really defeating them.
So how are for our corporate partners, how are you all, before we can talk about, because you are each doing some very amazing things and the companies are engaged in those things, but how do you even start the conversation? Okay, because I used to work for some people where you gotta have some tough conversations. You have to encourage them to come into the room, and we have to, I'm not telling you were doing it wrong, but I am saying we may need to explore some additional options. How do you start the conversations within your various organizations with the leadership to say, hey, we can be doing better, we have to do better. And we need to have some real discussions about how to operationalize what better looks like.
Yeah, I could start. We were talking about it at the table earlier. It's two things. One, you have to make the barriers to entry so easy that people don't need to disclose their disability. They can just work there, the jobs are accessible, we talked about all of those sorts of things. The second is the cultural piece, that you need to reduce the stigma that you talked about so that people can disclose and feel perfectly comfortable, like that's not gonna change their career progressions. And so we've created things like affinity groups. In fact, the executive sponsor of our affinity group is Dave Limp. He runs our devices and services organization, reports directly to our CEO, and super engaged. And so if you engage at that high level, and you recognize that it's a partnership and you need to listen to your employees and you need to engage in them as part of that conversation, you can achieve a lot.
Juan, how do we make sure our friends have the tough conversations?
So it's interesting, right? Because I'll put this into sort of the post-George Floyd world of activist employees. And I think we have in our ERGs, our affinity groups, I think sort of this recognition of their voices are empowered and we have to hear them. So it is about a leadership play, 100% completely agree about making sure you have that buy-in, but it's also what you're seeing is a very active group of employees that have come together, and we've seen it with API Hate, the post-George Floyd thing, and I've seen it with the PWD community of, frankly, raising their hands and stomping their feet, figuratively and literally, about what accommodations, what they need, how they're going to be heard, and how they're going to be seen. And so I think that's a really interesting point. You also have activist investors out there who are now being very probative with companies like ours saying, well, really, what are you doing in that space? So it's an interesting externality point that I wanted to point out, Simone. So I think there is the right thing to do. There is about leadership, but there's also reputational risk. That if you're not doing this, then you're going to be held out in a way that is not the best look for your company. And actually, now the consumers, they're activists too, and looking at, well, maybe I don't want to do your brand if this is the kind of company you are. So just a congealing of a whole lot of factors that I think are important that are weighing in on corporate America, and I think that's a good thing.
So what does this look like at McDonald's, Carlos? Because, you all are including people with disabilities in your hiring plans. Talk about some successes, and if you have any insight on how you all are trying to innovate around the customer experience piece, because there's the franchisee, the folks on corporate side, but it's also me going into a McDonald's, whoever, there's McDonald's down the street that I like to Uber Eats from every now and then, but some days a girl want to go in.
No, well, there's a lot going on. In terms of successes, I've been in a very exploratory phase where my position is global. So we're in over 120 markets, over 40,000 McDonald's worldwide. I could speak about successes all day long. I was just in Pakistan last month, and they have partnered with NGOs to bring in more folks with hearing disabilities to the restaurant. I was in Austria the week before Pakistan, and a franchisee there has about 4 to 5 deaf employees who are working in the crew. And as you know, restaurants are very busy and loud and whatnot, but they have made it a point where everybody, regardless if you can speak or not, knows sign language. And they have showed that even helps people who don't have hearing disabilities, where it's across the kitchen and I can't hear you, I might as well just sign like, hey, we need this order or whatever. And so that has been very beneficial across that restaurant. So many other successes, here in the U.S. In our Chicago area, we partnered with the local rehab center, and I think within a month we employed about 5 people with disabilities in our innovation restaurant. And last year, the state of Illinois awarded us with the Employer Innovation Award, for that partnership. So there's a lot of successes. I'm still exploring more. Like I said, we're in 120 markets, so I'm going to see what best practices out there, and then really my goal is to just amplify those messages across our franchisees so they can adapt some of those. From our customer side, I sit more on the people side of our functions, but we do have a digital accessibility team that has done amazing work in this space, and innovations like having accessible kiosks for our blind customers to have an experience within the kiosk, partnering with the National Federation of the Blind and other companies like AudioNav to ensure that we have those kiosks accessible to them. We're starting to see how we can amplify our drive-through experience for deaf customers. But that's a whole different world that I'm not part of, but I have very close ties to. But I know we do a lot of great work for the customers as well.
While Carlos was speaking, I whispered to Mark, I said, "Is a McDonald's in Pakistan?" Yeah. I was thinking the same thing y'all were thinking.
There's about 100.
We need to check, Carlos. Emily, I want to take a slight turn here if I can, because we have some incredible organizations in this room doing everything that they can to be inclusive. But oftentimes, I don't know if we talk enough about the income limitations as it relates to the disability community that some folks have to abide by if they want to continue to receive vitally important services. I'm talking about home health care services, for example. There are income limitations that are holding people back from work, from financial freedom. Talk to us a little bit about what those limitations are, how they affect the disability community, both monetarily, but also in terms of attitudes and concerns about just pursuing employment in the first place.
I'm really glad that we're bringing this up, because I don't think we can have a conversation about employment without asking ourselves who's being shut out of employment. We talked about those numbers earlier being stagnant, and a huge part of that is that we are keeping disabled people in poverty by placing asset limits on them if they need access to essential services. And I'm going to be very straightforward. I am someone who needs access to these essential services. And so for much of my life, I have had to navigate asset caps, which means that I was not able to reach my full earning potential and would have to spend that money down so that I could have physical therapy, so that I could simply get out of bed and function in the morning. And I think that we need to be honest about that reality. We can have all of the inclusion initiatives in the world. We can say DEIA all day, but how is that going to be achieved if we're not recognizing the fact that people cannot get access to their basic needs and they cannot have employment? We're keeping them in a catch-22. Either you don't earn enough to live, or you can earn enough to live, but then you can't get the services that you need. It's incredibly unfair, incredibly unfair. And so I really encourage us to think through who is not even at the table in this conversation, because we haven't made a space for them at the table. And I recognize that it's a privilege that I am part of this conversation, that I have a family who could support me, that I've been able to navigate and finally find a sustainable way to earn money and also, quite honestly, pay for services that I need. That's not something that we should have to do when we have access to quality health care in America, and yet not everybody has access to that. You can see I'm on my soapbox here, so I'm gonna take notes.
You're right.
So I'll get off my soapbox. I'll try to calm down now, but I will just say that I really, really hope that we are thinking hard about this conversation about employment and recognizing that it's not just about employment, it's about who we're keeping from being employed.
Wow.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for that. Crystal, people are working longer. We are not friends, though, so folks ain't, Congress ain't raised the age yet, honey, but I hope we don't know what's going on. That's another panel. We'll have to check in with Speaker McCarthy on what's happening there as it relates to Social Security. But people are working longer. They're working longer past their traditional retirement age for a number of reasons, frankly. But that also includes people with disabilities. It includes caregivers, veterans, older adults. What are some of the ways that the Easterseals Senior Community Services Employment Program is supporting older Americans in securing very meaningful work?
So the Senior Community Service Employment Program has been around since 1965. A lot of us aren't familiar with it. The program started at the same time as the Job Corps during the Lyndon B. Johnson administration. It's a very valued program funded by the United States Department of Labor, and the program is designed specifically for those who are low income, that are 55 and older, that are looking to retool, retrain, and regain employment. There's strength in numbers. Talent is ageless. I can say all the different adages that we definitely use within the community of the people that we serve. And I would definitely talk on and on about what value mature job seekers bring to the plate. As we live longer, as we live healthier lives, we need this seat at the table. Mature job seekers within the Senior Community Service Employment Program are really, really knocking it out the box as it relates to learning new skills, having partnerships with technology resources, retraining and retooling and partnering with big, important technology companies to pivot and move out of being in a state of uncertainty to becoming more confident and becoming more employable. We're also seeing more of our job seekers that are moving into remote employment. Obviously, we had that conversation earlier, and staying into remote employment. We're also finding within our population a lot of entrepreneurial skills and a lot of our job seekers that really want to just do what makes them happy as it relates to their passions, their skills, and their abilities. So looking in that direction, and also something that we've been doing a long time, Easterseals has been an exemplary player in the field as it relates to older worker employment since 2003. I gotta say that. But something that we've definitely been successful with is our storytelling. We have since 2003 been a part of storytelling on Capitol Hill. We talk to our lawmakers about those stories in the communities that we serve. We serve over 2,200 job seekers across the country, so we have lots of stories to tell about how they navigated, how they were at one time a caregiver and now getting training towards becoming employable, how during the pandemic, by convening and by meeting via virtual Zoom, it gave them hope and it gave them success to move towards in life. So the program is very, very important and really something that's important to this population, and we love what we do, and we're here to stay.
Here to stay, I love that. All right, I'm gonna take another turn. Y'all stay with me. I'm just gonna throw this out to whomever would like to answer first. But it seems to me we have to address the elephant in the room, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. Somebody's like, what elephant is this girl trying to address? And the elephant is this: at a time where we are sitting here having a conversation about DEIA, about accessibility, we're talking about inclusion, at a time when those very words are being weaponized all across the country. And I do a lot of different series on my show, and I was chatting with an executive from a company that shall not be named, but I was talking about their initiatives around some of the work that they were doing. And they said to me, I said, because it's diversity, inclusion, they're like, oh, we don't really do diversity. We don't like to say the term diversity anymore. We talk about And there was some term that this executive came up with. And I asked why. I said, well, what? Doesn't your title have diversity and inclusion in it? They're like, yes, but we're dropping the diversity and we're moving away from the inclusion terminology, but we are still doing that work. And this executive said because they are concerned about the backlash in this current climate. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about that, because if we're talking about ensuring accessible workplaces and making sure that we are creating environments where everyone can thrive, but at the same time we are experiencing a national environment where those very words are under assault, it seems as though we are at an impasse. What say you?
Well, I'll go first, because since yesterday was DE&I Day at Comcast Corporation, so I understand the folks are going to play their politics, Simone, but I can only speak for my company, our company, in terms of doubling down on this. And look, my philosophical view, because this is more philosophical view, is like if we don't have a shared view of our past and our current state, we're not going to have a shared future. And DE&I is part of that storytelling. It is about that narrative. It is about understanding where we've been to where we're going to go. And if we can't have that conversation, we're a lot more screwed up than I hope we're not. But I do think that corporations are going to have to make decisions about that. Clearly, we've made one, and we did it yesterday. So I'm proud of that. And again, I think with every movement, there's a counter movement. And I think seeing that what we're seeing, whether it's certain states that will remain nameless, I think there's the movement and the counter movement. And now, what's the backlash? What's the step forward on that? Because I do think that shared vision, and that's for all communities, we have to understand that, and we need to have these conversations. You can figure out different solutions, but we have to have that shared awareness. And I think I'm bullish on we as a country getting past some of this silliness right now.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I mean, we're Amazon, we have 1 million employees just in the US. We have a lot of people with a lot of different perspectives. We have, I don't know how many millions of customers that all want different things from their online store or their physical store. But we've taken a very firm position on this that we put on our website. We talk about diversity and inclusion. We have firm positions on all sorts of topics that we feel very passionately about. And I think the employer community can lead in a lot of these areas to create, to remove the stigma of talking about the issue. Mm-hmm. Disability, actually, the word itself used to be like, I think Emily was mentioning, like, there's something wrong with disability. Mm-hmm. But we've started to embrace the word disability. It's like disability power. You start to do those things with diversity and inclusion and those sorts of things, and you make it actually a positive thing. And I think employers have a really big role to play in that has nothing to do with politics. It just has to do with the fact that it's good for business, it's good for the communities, it's good for humanity, really.
I'll just add from a McDonald's standpoint, DE&I is in our DNA, right? We want to represent the communities in which we serve. So in the U.S. we have 14,000 restaurants plus. So we're in almost every community. So it would be a huge mistake to shy away from DEI. So we don't see that happening.
Go ahead, Emily, go ahead.
I realize I'm perhaps at a bit of an advantage here because I'm not speaking on behalf of a corporation. I'm just speaking on behalf of Emily Incorporated over here. So I can say, I am so sick and tired of companies, and this is not directed at anyone on this stage, of companies saying, we see you, but we don't want to use the word disability. We see you, but we're going to erase part of you. Yeah. If you're not acknowledging that I'm disabled, then you're not acknowledging me, period. Mm-hmm. And so what is so incredibly important to me is that the burden is not on me to come to a company and say, I am disabled and I am proud of it. I want you to say, we are proud to have you as an employee, as someone who is disabled.
just like to add, as a provider, as a partner, I'd like to get rid of the DEIA and just come up with HUMAN. You know, we're humans, we're people. Can we live where we're treated equal and the same and get to that point?
I knew this was a good turn to take. I told y'all, just stay with me in the vehicle. As we wrap up, I think you all have provided some very keen and insight, just really into from a corporate perspective, from a provider perspective, but also, Emily, from the perspective of the advocacy community here. I would like us to end on this note. And Ms. Crystal, I'm gonna start with you, and then we will go around the horn. But in one word, how would you describe the future of disability employment in America?
Hope.
Hope. Carlos?
One word?
It's hard.
Progress?
Progress. Emily?
Evolving.
Evolving. Juan?
I'm going to break your rule. Cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic.
I'm a pessimist, but I'm always trying to stay positive, yes.
Yeah.
Mark?
Can I say all of the above? I don't know if that's... they stole promising. I'll say promising.
Promising. See, there's a little hope here. I always believe that we have to end on hope, because without hope, I don't understand how you expect people to do the work to make our communities, our companies, our organizations, and our world a better place. Please give this esteemed panel a round of applause. Thank you all so much for your time. Thank you.
Oh, got it. That was me.
Give it up. As our panel is exiting the stage, I just want to encourage you all to eat the dessert, to have the coffee, okay? The panelists have skipped straight to dessert, so we could bring a lunch back around. I think we know somebody in here. Wasn't that amazing? I really appreciate the candidness here. So we're gonna go ahead and keep the party going, if you will, because I had my 2 shots of espresso before I came in here. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about transportation. If you see where we're going here, first we started with our federal government representatives talking about transportation and employment. Then we went a little deep dive on employment from the corporate perspective, advocates and providers. Now we're gonna do a deep dive on transportation. Because transportation is absolutely key to equity, inclusion, and access. It is key. Think about it. Think about all of the ways, think about everything you had to do just to get here today. And how the barriers for you or for someone else are different for you, are different. So we're gonna dig into this with some amazing panelists. I want to invite Rory Cooper to the stage. Rory is the Director of Human Engineering Research Laboratories at the University of Pittsburgh. Give it up for Rory Cooper. We're going to keep the party going with Ben Trockman. He is a disability advocate and city councilman in Evans, Indiana. All right, Ben. Heather Ansley is also here. Heather is the Associate Executive Director of Government Relations and Associate General Counsel for Corporate and Government Relations and Paralyzed Veterans of America. David Dreyth is here. He's the CEO of Easterseals Crossroads in Indianapolis, Indiana. And Judy Shanley is here. She is a PhD, MBA, and she's the Assistant Vice President of Education and Youth Transition for Easterseals National Office and Director of the National Center for Mobility Management, honey. She got this is a big job, okay? Judy got a lot of jobs. Thank you all for being here today. And I want to set the stage with this. We talk about transportation. I think we're also talking about mobility as well. And as we discussed, it is absolutely key to equity and inclusion and access for everyone. Because while we know remote work has absolutely provided some flexibility, some incredible opportunities, if you will, for people with disabilities to enter the workforce. And we know about the Zoom world or the Teams folks. So raise your hand if y'all are in the Teams the Teams world, that has really allowed us to be more, to continue to create community when we're still apart. There is nothing like experiencing work in the workplace. There's nothing like visiting a family member in person. There's nothing like being able to catch up with a friend in person. So this esteemed group of panelists here, y'all, they're gonna speak to the core of why more accessible transportation and continued innovation is not just key, but critical. So let's get started. I wanna begin with a basic question for everyone here, and it's this. Why is transportation essential to improve the quality of life for the 61+ million Americans who with disabilities? So why is it essential first?
Can I start?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Sure. Well, first I'd like to start by saying it's pretty cool that Emily and Carlos couldn't even be here today without some of the technologies that I invented.
Come on, Ben. It's a flex, as we like to say, as the kids like to say.
So it's always fun when I get out and about and see things that came from our lab on people's chairs. But we couldn't be here. Frankly, I came in from Pittsburgh, right? And we drove in, and you need to have an accessible car, right? You need to have gas stations so you can gas up in and use. You need to have a hotel you can stay in, and so you need a metro to get from the hotel to here. In DC that you can use.
Well, I want to throw the question to the other panelists as well, but Roy, I have one follow-up for you. How recent are some of these technologies? Because when you said about some of the things that you've invented, it really made me think about how this must be recent technology that we're dealing with.
In some cases, so the funny thing I probably have on this panel is I was injured pre-ADA. Mm-hmm. So I lived in a world where airplanes denied us to fly, or I would get on the flight and they would ask me where my attendant was, and I'd say I don't travel with an attendant, and then they'd ask the passenger next to me, would you help the emergency? And I would usually tell them, he might be in better or worse shape than I am if this plane crashes, right? So why are you asking them? You could be denied a credit card, couldn't rent a car, and there wasn't a hotel to stay in if you went somewhere. And so, post ADA, it was tremendous changes. Not only that, so we talked a bit about globally, the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities have helped make it possible for us to travel overseas. I served in the Army, and I married a wonderful German girl, now my wife of over 40 years. And so we go to Europe, and the impact the ADA had on globally has also been tremendous as well. So we can go over there and visit family and stay with family. But we've got a long ways to go. I will tell you something I'd love to talk about a little bit is I'm excited about the electric vehicle revolution, but also concerned about it as well.
Did Rory see my questions? Because we have some of that a little bit later in this panel. Hold that thought. If I can have two other panelists weigh in here. Why is this conversation access essential? But also, if you could also speak to some of the current barriers that folks are still experiencing.
Simone, if I may.
Yes, please, Councilman.
Thank you for the recognition. By the way, Easterseals colors you're wearing today.
One could argue I read the briefing book.
So let me just share something that I think is on a lot of our minds as of late, post-pandemic, is mental health. One thing that I don't think talk about enough in terms of transportation and our ability to travel at any time is the impact that has on our mental health. A simple vacation, right? People with disabilities many times are confined to their homes or their own communities and don't have the opportunity to get outside of their own city. And so when I think about, I've been privileged to make this trip here And many of us have, but I look at some of my other friends within the disability community that don't have the opportunity to leave their communities, to see some of the cool things that happen. I was at the reflection pond in the Korean War memorial last night, and I was able to escape all of the stress of work by just thinking and enjoying the sights. And so I think that it's absolutely necessary, because we already have a population that deals with a inordinate amount of struggles, and being able to have a little bit of a release and be able to enjoy life like everyone else is incredibly important, and that all ties back to mental health.
Judy, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, first, I'm just really proud that Easterseals thinks and believes that transportation is so important, and it underpins all that we do. I'm really proud to be part of an organization that convenes a really distinguished panel like this and a forum like this to address transportation. You asked about the barriers, and I think I work at a national center funded by the Federal Transit Administration, and one of the barriers we continue to see are policy barriers across various agencies that preclude particular individuals from riding certain vehicles, and when people ride and how the funding occurs. So I think we've come a long way, but there continues to be policy barriers that really inhibit the ability of all individuals, including those with individuals, to travel when they want, wherever they want.
Roy talked about pre-ADA, and I think it's very important to just recognize the changes that have just our society has gone through since the passage of that legislation, and obviously there's so much innovation happening now. David, we do know that Easterseals Crossroads, it really lives in the heart of a truly Midwestern city now. I'm from North Omaha, Nebraska, honey, but we'll give it to you today. We'll give it to you today in Indianapolis, but we are in the middle of the map. So let's talk about some of the progress made over the last 10 years. What developments have you seen locally that could be replicated in other cities across the U.S.?
Yeah, I was reminded as I was thinking about this, because we listen to the transportation challenges every day, so it's hard to think that there has been progress. But after, and we were talking about this, and Judy said, you're going to be asked, what are the positive things happening? What are they? I don't know what they are. But then I was listening to an interview with Liz Carr, who is a British actor, Laurence Olivier Award-winning actor and disability rights activist. And we think about the public transportation in the UK as being so great. You can get anywhere. You don't need a car. But she loves coming to the US because she can roll her chair on a bus just about anywhere in the country. Oh, wow. So that's progress. I think about what we're doing, and we started doing about 3 years ago in Indianapolis with wayfinding apps for young adults with intellectual disabilities. It used to be it would take a staff member to ride with somebody on the bus multiple times, and you've taught that person how to get to the job and back home. That's it. And it's all the hours and effort that's gone into that. We have a one-man crusader at Easterseals Crossroads who was using a flip phone, but then he heard about this wayfinding app, tossed the flip phone, taught himself to use a smartphone, and has been encouraging young adults to do that. And it's a nerve-wracking process for both the young adult and the family of, hey, my son or daughter is going to get on a bus and go God knows where. And what eases that anxiety is when people then realize, oh, it's not just to work and back. Now with this app, I can go to the movies. I can go see my friends. I can stop some of this isolation. And I want to thank our partners at Comcast who've been funding a digital literacy project for Easterseals affiliates. They've enabled us to begin dispersing this wayfinding app throughout more students and more young adults that are finding the world of work. The young adults we're serving during COVID, everybody learned how essential they were. The Community Health Network in Indianapolis, a hospital network, realized oh my goodness, we could be nowhere without these employees that are showing up to these essential jobs, and transportation is absolutely necessary for them to get there.
It's absolutely critical. Roy, peel the layers back for us. What kind of innovations have you been involved in or have you seen that are helping improve the state of accessible transportation and travel right now? And then my follow-up is about the electric cars. But let's start with what technology is out there? What things have you, what are you working on?
Well, I'm working on a lot of things. I do a lot of work in autonomous vehicles now. We're working on making electric vehicles accessible, autonomous vehicle transportation systems, so not just the vehicle itself, but how do you communicate with them, where do you go, how do you do wayfinding, trip planning. It's an entire trip. That's part of the thing that people forget. You have to get to your house. How do you carry groceries? How do you load your wheelchair in? Wheelchair tie downs, occupant restraints. How do you communicate with the vehicle if something goes wrong? In what forms do you communicate in, depending on the person's impairments? But those are all things that we're working on. Of course, making better wheelchair technology, because I don't think we want to throw all the responsibility on the vehicle manufacturer, or for that matter on the airline industry or the aircraft manufacturer. Maybe we can look at different designs of wheelchairs. There's a lot of cool things like, the advanced battery technologies, lithium-ion batteries, lithium polymer batteries that are making, lawnmowers better and hand tools that could also make wheelchairs lighter, and see some of that coming out of Europe now, which means they can make them easier to be transported and more compatible with vehicles. I think we need to start looking them at systems, so a whole system of transportation, mobility in your home, in the community, all the way to around the globe. I think there's some also funny things. I was reading a book that actually PVA helped sponsor about the history of wheelchair basketball, but really it's in many ways it's kind of a history about about spinal cord injury and about people getting out of the community for really in large numbers for the first time post World War II. What really fascinated in that book is that at that time, PVA and some of the other disability veterans groups got Congress to authorize to do a contract to have an automobile companies make accessible vehicles for the first time. And car companies actually made cars that you could drive from the factory. And I'd kind of like to see that come back again, really, right? Because I'm sure this audience knows, but for those of you who don't, when I or colleagues of mine that have a disability buy a car, we take it somewhere else and they chop it up. Literally a brand new car.
I did not know that. How many people here knew that? Not enough hands went up. So along those lines then, you mentioned your concern about electric vehicles, and there has been a push from this administration about sustainability. Electric vehicles is one of those. A lot of subsidies and tax breaks going to companies and entities who are engaged in the creation of those, putting them on the market, cleaner, better for our environment. But just as we discussed in the employment conversation about how we need everyone at the table as we are making key decisions, it seems as though that this applies here to the electric car development as well, does it not?
Oh, so absolutely. We need to be at the table for sure. Both electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles have a lot of potential, but they bring with them. So one of the problems with electric vehicles currently is they're all being designed with what's called a skateboard. So all the batteries are in this chassis in the bottom. Well, those of us that drive from a van in a wheelchair, use a van for transportation, they typically lower the floor, and you can't do that if it's full of batteries. And so that means you have to pop the ceiling up. Also, one reason you lower the floor is so you can use a ramp, because ramps are fairly simple and reliable. Where if you have to use a lift, those of us been around long enough, those of us that even ride public transportation for lifts know how often you're told, oh, the lift's not working today, wait for the next bus or with the next vehicle. Well, that happened it happened to us past with our own vehicles when we had lifts. So this is where we have to say, look, that might work out. I understand because I'm an engineer and that works out from a vehicle stability point of view, but it really makes accessibility a bear. And the vehicles are taller. So, but the problem now is if you pop the roof up, right, and put a lift in, one is can you even do that because can you modify the chassis because the batteries are there? And secondly, if the OEM manufacturer is not doing it from the beginning, there's a lot of liability on the aftermarket manufacturer who's going to go in there and chop up these high voltage batteries and move them around and change the whole electrical wiring system. So that's where my concern comes about is what's going to happen to that population that relies on that technology. And so, that's part about being there at the beginning. Maybe there has to be a section where there just can't be batteries. Maybe there has to be attachment points from the OEM manufacturer where a ramp can go, right?
Maybe some of our federal partners in here need to do a little sidebar, and maybe there needs to be a meeting. I don't know.
And the cities can get involved too, because we can redesign parking spaces. Maybe there's an elevated platform next to a parking space, like we did for light rail, and even some buses do that. So maybe the vehicle, maybe we've gone too far down the rabbit hole, and so we've got to, we have to maybe change parking, which is a whole nother barrier. Those of us that do drive, there's
a whole nother.
There's not enough parking spaces.
I mean, talk about it, and not to mention the people that park in the parking spaces that aren't for them. Yeah. Not anybody in this room, of course. Heather, we talked a little bit about leisure, right? Like we're talking about accessible transportation for leisure. The councilman made the really profound point, I think, about this. So many people that he knows, friends of his, that do not have the opportunity to leave their communities. In some instances, their homes. Yeah. And I feel like we need to talk a little bit more about what it's like doing everyday activities for folks, like getting to work, accessing medical appointments, right? Going to the grocery store, visiting a friend. And I believe it is reported that an estimated 25.5 million Americans have disabilities that make traveling just outside of the home difficult. 13.4 million of these Americans are adults ages in 18 to all the way up to 64. That's the age group with the typically higher labor force participation that we just discussed. So talk to me a little bit about this piece and your experience, particularly with the population that you all work with, veterans.
Yeah, so access to transportation of a variety of sorts it is part of everything we do, right? Everything that you mentioned, whether it's going to the grocery store, going to the doctor's office, going to, on that Caribbean trip you've been looking forward to, is being able to access transportation. And I think sometimes we think of transportation as, like one mode, but many times we're looking at multiple modes. So I do a lot of work in access to air travel, and we focus a lot on the airplane itself. But how did we get to the airport? Did the person have an accessible vehicle? Did they have to try to take the metro? Was the metro open early enough for them to be able to get their flight? Could they get an accessible vehicle? Once you get to the airport and to your destination, does the hotel shuttle have accessibility? My colleague and I love to tell the story of we flew from here to San Francisco, and then we spent 3 hours trying to get 1 mile from the airport to the hotel because there was no accessible transportation. They kept telling us the accessible shuttle was the next one. Well, it was not the next one. It turns out it wasn't in service that day. So, just the challenges that you have to go through, and that's just the transportation of getting there. That's not even including the barriers you might face at the hotel or at the airport or at any of the places that you're at. So it's really understanding that as we're looking at, we've spent a lot of time trying to get the existing transportation systems to recognize the needs of people with disabilities, but as we're talking about as Dr. Cooper mentioned, these emerging technologies, and not even emerging, I mean, they're out there, in various places. Do they even include people with disabilities, or are we just creating more and more transportation options that just completely leave out this population?
This is such a good point. I feel like what we're talking about is the entire system of transportation. And Judy, I know that the National Center for Mobility Management, you all look at the system across the board. So what are you seeing in the work that you all are doing? What is on the horizon, if you will, for the next generation of more accessible transportation systems?
For those of you who don't know, the National Center for Mobility Management is funded by the Federal Transit Administration, and we're proud to be a partner. The Community Transportation Association leads the effort, and Easterseals is a critical partner in that. And we think about the system as all of those entities, those agencies that have anything to do with transportation coming together to build a coalition, a coordinated network, so that regardless if you have a healthcare appointment, you have a doctor's appointment, you need to access food, all of those entities that are supporting those services are cohesive. They're educated, they're knowledgeable about transportation service. And so mobility management is really the service of connecting human services and transportation services. And I think what we've seen nationally over the last years that Easterseals has been involved in this work is transportation is everyone's business, right? It's not just about a Department of Transportation, not about just the state agencies that administer transportation. It's not just about the transit providers, the innovations that are out there. It's everyone's business. And that's what some federal policies are going on now that brings together agencies to focus on transportation, to build a system so that people can get where they want to go and when they want. I refer to it as an inclusive continuum of accessible transportation and mobility. And wouldn't that be ideal? No gaps, not curb ramps. People just can go where they want to go.
When they want to go, right?
When they want to
go. We all want spontaneity, reliability, affordability, right, and good coverage.
Yep.
Because like Washington, D.C. is, I know there's still got problems, but it's much more accessible than if you go, 60 miles outside of Washington, D.C. Then there isn't, and you get it outside into rural communities, there aren't bus systems, there aren't metro systems. And so, we need better coverage as well.
This is an important point. David, I often think when we have a conversation about transportation systems and access and mobility, and we're going to talk about the airlines in a moment, because let me tell you, the councilman has been on the front lines of this fight for a while. But say as the airlines, I think about the community where I'm from. The first time I took a metro was when I moved to Washington, D.C. in 2014. Where I'm from, you either drive a car or you take the bus. If you are afforded the ability to have a car, or you take the bus, or you just don't go. I think about even more rural places in the state of Nebraska or any places across the country. The trolley and the tram is not coming through Scottsbluff, Nebraska.
Not yet.
Not right now. So what about the folks, what about the people with disabilities in communities like those?
Yeah, well, and it's not just rural areas either. I mean, I think about, you think of Indianapolis as an urban area, but a lot of employers have developed outside of city limits, outside of the beltways, beyond public transportation grids. And as a result, and then as they're looking for employers, there's no way for people with disabilities or even people who are trying to move out of poverty to get to these remoter areas in the city. One thing I have learned, though, is those types of corporations of those size have the ability to influence transportation routes. I've seen it happen, and those types of companies that are desperate for employees, that's where they should be looking. How can we, it's not how do we make people with disabilities more suitable to work for us, how do we make our company more suitable to work for people with disabilities, just like Emily said earlier, right? So I look at even the rural areas as well. We've got to get super creative because we don't have a mass transit grid that reaches, say, to Richmond, Indiana, which is, 40 miles, 60 miles to our east, right? Or even to Lafayette, West Lafayette, which is the home of Purdue. There's lots of job opportunities, and there's lots of people living in between that could work in Indianapolis or Lafayette. There's no way to get to either place unless you own and drive a car, right? So I think it's absolutely necessary that it's not just government, it's not just policymakers, but it's the private world as well. It's the corporate world that is taking the lead to help build those ways.
Taking the lead to help build them, but then also making sure that they understand the practical implications. I'm really struck by the story that you told, Heather, of waiting, waiting just to go a half a mile because the transportation could not serve you. Right. So that's a huge gap. There's a big discrepancy, and so great that the hotel or the airline or the airport had the service, but the practical implication of the service actually didn't serve the people.
No. That's correct. And ironically, when we got to the hotel, we asked, well, how do we get to the transportation system, which was accessible? And they said, oh, we have a shuttle. And we said, your shuttle's not accessible. We've already been through this. So people, it is such a disconnect with understanding the systems and how they all have to work together because, when you're in an area, whether it's, being able to be in a place where there's only a vehicle, you have to have a vehicle and you can't afford a vehicle or you are not able to drive a vehicle, whatever the case may be, you're shut out of so many things. We think about healthcare a lot of times. So we hear constantly from, the Department of Veterans Affairs, access to care it's not an economic issue. They have issues with people physically being able to get there. The transportation is an issue for people. So I think it's understanding that this isn't just something that's nice to do that the law requires because in 1990 we all said, okay, let's pass the Americans with Disabilities Act, but that is part of that disability equity and inclusion is making sure that if you your customers, whoever those customers are, which are everybody, that everyone can get to your facility and use it. And if you can't provide a service that everyone can use, then maybe you shouldn't provide it.
Yeah. Talk about it, Heather. Talk about it. I agree. Well, let's talk about an industry that people are increasingly pushed to adapt and change, who provides a service that everybody should be able to use. But, and I'm talking about the airline industry. Advisor Buckland, who was on our first panel, he made the point about 8 wheelchairs are damaged a day. And in 2019, which is the first full year of reporting that the Department of Transportation currently has, they said about 10,548 wheelchairs or scooters were either lost, they were either damaged or delayed, or they were even stolen. Mm-hmm. If you think about the numbers in terms of people with disabilities traveling, about 27 million passengers with disabilities traveled by air in 2019. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a lot of people. It seems like this is a key constituency that the airline industry should want to make sure that they are in fact serving. Ben, you've spent so long advocating for more accessible airlines. You have traveled hundreds of miles to different conferences, work events, like this very event that we're here right now. Can you just share a little bit of your personal experience with us, but also, what does the evolution of accessible air travel look like?
10 years ago, I was the national representative for Easterseals before I started my first job, back when I had all my hair. My family and I traveled 3 days from Evansville, Indiana, in our car to a conference in San Diego. We made 2 stops, and we loaded down my accessible vehicle, which I'm sure Rory had some sort of design input on. And it was tough, but I was 10 years younger. My family was 10 years younger. I have served in my previous career at a financial institution where I traveled to many different locations for conferences and forums just like this, as I advocated for disability inclusion in the employment sector. Today, 3 days ago, I drove from Evansville to Washington, D.C. 12 hours in a car with my mother and a caregiver. 10 years later, I'll tell you that in 2012, when I was a national representative for Easterseals, I spent some time advocating here on the Hill, talking to Department of Transportation, talking to senators, talking to legislators about how it was vitally important for the airlines to become more accessible and to allow individuals like myself to enter a plane and carry and keep my chair so that those numbers you spoke about earlier don't happen. Well, again, 10 years ago and today, there is no difference. And I know that there are a lot of great people in this room that are working tirelessly on this effort. But personally, for me, it requires a lot of energy. It requires hiring people to travel along with me. It requires exposure to different hotels that might not be accessible to me along the path. I traveled to my cousin's wedding in Florida a couple of months ago, and that was a 20 or so hour drive. And it's just tough, Simone. And the thought that the airlines have, in my 10 years of advocacy, not yet made significant progress. That's because they didn't have Advisor Buckland on their butts as he is right now. So I expect that to change soon. But I think it's important to note that I understand I'm privileged to have a family that can afford to get me an accessible van, which, as Rory spoke about earlier, we purchase a van and then you have to spend another $30,000 to make it accessible. It's expensive, it's not accessible, it's scary. Our world needs to adapt so that individuals like myself that are pursuing meaningful employment, that are trying to simply reconnect with our family and friends in other places, we need to do better. And so what does the future look like? The future looks like skipping the damn road trips. The future looks like being able to get on an airplane. The future looks like no 3-day trips to San Diego. The future looks like a trip to Europe, as I've always dreamed of. And we've got progress to make, but with the good people in this room, I have full belief that we will get there. If it's not in my generation, it certainly will be for the next.
Give Ben a round of applause. Okay, I need the panel to unpack this for me. What the hell is going on with the airline? What the hell is going on?
Let me add to that. Well, there's 2 things. What's going on with the airlines? They got exempted from the ADA. And so if the airlines were like the buses and light rail and the rail system, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. So that's the first thing, is that they use public airspaces, they use public airports, they provide a necessary service to the public. They need to come compliant. And we need to hold them accountable. The other thing is that Ben needs to be able to stay in his wheelchair when he flies. because there's likely, there's other people that have respirators, ventilators, oxygen systems. They need specialized seating or specialized postural supports. Hopefully I'm not getting too technical here. And that's literally so they can stay alive. And if you can't do that on a plane, you can't fly. And so that's what we need to do. The other thing is, I'll be a little bit personal here. I mean, I have to change my food and water intake to fly. I have to basically put my health at risk to go to take a business trip or even a leisure trip to fly. Because we need accessible seating for those who do transfer into the seat. You have to be able to get there and not be handled like luggage. And you need to be able to use the bathroom. And so those are, and I don't think it's that complicated. I had the privilege of serving on the Transportation Research Board Committee for the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And we did extensive study, talking with the airline industry, talking with airline manufacturers, talking with the airports, talking with consumers. It's technically feasible, it's a matter of will, and it's probably a matter of law. And a lot of it is, a lot of the barriers are probably economic barriers. Like I said, I've lived in a pre-ADA world. Everybody had economic barriers. Even when it was under Section 504 that Judy Heumann fought so vehemently for, government agencies, state agencies, universities, schools, all said, too expensive, can't do this. Kids with disabilities don't need to go to school. You don't need to work. Well, we changed that with Section 504. That's why people, if you read Judy Heuman's book, you'll find out even people had to put their own health at risk to do that. And that's what we're on the. This is to me, I think two things really: travel and employment are kind of the last frontiers, right? If we can address those, we'll have a real chance of being part of society.
Amen.
Well, in the time that we have left, I think that we have, look, we need to celebrate the gains that have absolutely been made. And progress the progress that has been made is absolutely critical and important. But we still have a very long ways to go here in this country as it relates to accessible transportation, as it relates to mobility. And so I guess my question for you all is, what is your hope for the future? Where do you want it to look like 5 years from now? Because I don't believe we have to wait 10. Hell, we shouldn't have to wait 5, but that's another story. What is your hope? What should this look like 5 years from now? And I need to do a special on the show also to unpack how the airlines got exempted from the ADA. So that's my part. My hope for the future is I explain to the rest of America who's tuning in Saturday and Sunday at 4 p.m. what the hell is going on. So that's my part. I can do that. So my hope for the future is that the rest of us and frankly, I would just say it's a travesty that because I am not a person with disabilities, and I'm not directly, or someone in my immediate family is not directly impacted, that I did not know this information. Right. So we have to do better. The rest of us need to do better. So go ahead, Heather. We'll start with you.
No, I was going to say, I think that is exactly the issue, is that it has been left to people with disabilities to experience this, and their friends and their colleagues and their coworkers, and not seen as something that is part of the human condition, which is that we should all be aware that when we get on an airplane, there are people who bought the same ticket you did, who may have paid more for their fare, who can't access the restroom. They can't even contort themselves to get in the restroom on a cross-country flight. That their wheelchair has been taken from them and stuffed into the cargo bin. They hope it arrives, and they hope that it's in condition, and that they don't get stuck on the plane because they forgot to bring the aisle chair to help them get off, and that they're not dropped and injured, and fill in the blank of 100 other things. This is not something that's just people with disabilities. This should be all of us. And the people get so wrapped up, I think, particularly in air travel, in their own experience, and I'm compressed, and I didn't get food or, the stuff that we all kind of complain about, people like me that don't have a physical disability.
The viral video with the man yelling about the baby.
The baby's
Get the
crying.
baby off.
Yes. But I think that we kind of stop to forget that, I said, one person described me one time, well, a lot of passengers feel like cattle, in an airplane. I said, the most common thing I hear, and Dr. Cooper used it today, is a person in a wheelchair feels like luggage. Do you realize luggage is an inanimate object that we assign no feeling to? At least cattle, we kind of feel like, well, maybe they feel pain. At least they, we need to be humane to them. Luggage is something that we buy new at the store when we don't like it anymore. This is how we treat our fellow human beings. And until we all say, no, we're not going to allow this to happen anymore, that is when we will see true change.
David, final comment?
I just want to follow up on that, just one thing.
Oh, well, we're going to go down the line for final comments, Roy, so hold yours. Dr. Cooper, David?
No, to me, it's about ending isolation, and that's why transportation is key. For a year and a half during COVID, we experienced the isolation people with disabilities experience all the time because we could not get in the presence of the people we know and love, right? We couldn't get to the workplace and collaborate with those. So we can't just make workarounds that work around transportation. We have to address that to end isolation. And my hope for the future is when we fix that, we fix a lot of the issues related to isolation.
Wow. Judy?
A very long time ago, someone, a professional that was really involved in coordination efforts, taught me a word, BORPSAT. And what that means is bunch of the right people sitting at the table. Well, people with disabilities are the right people, and they need to be at the table in every decision that's made. So as new businesses and employers come into a community, that they have the voice of that community as they're launching their business. So healthcare providers can have the voice of people with disabilities, so services plans. So remember that, BORPSAT, and be at the table.
Dr. Cooper.
Well, first, I think we have to be careful about the use of statistics when we talk about how many wheelchairs are lost or damaged. Because what that really means to the person is, it would be like if the statistics were, 1 out of every 10 passengers had their leg cut off when they took a flight, we would be having an entirely different discussion. But for me, it's the same effect. Right? Or if they said, oh, we're going to strip all the clothes off of every third passenger on the flight, we'd be outraged and say that's inhuman. But we do that to people with disabilities every time they fly. Or at least we put them at the risk of that. So it's got to humanize this, right? And I think you made a good point, right? It's very common for people who do fly to say you're treated like luggage, and it is dehumanizing. So it's not just about how many wheelchairs are damaged and reducing the number of damage. You've got to look at the impact it has on people's lives or the loss of those wheelchairs. Secondly, I do think, one of my soapboxes is, it's not just getting people with disabilities at the table, but we need to create opportunities for people with disabilities to get the education and employment, so they are professionals, they are employers, and they can speak with authority at the table, not only from their lived experience, but from their professional training and professional experience.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. Councilman, you're going to take us home.
I like closing. So I whether it's 5 years or 10 years, Simone, to kind of compile, hopefully pack up what we've talked about in terms of employment, in terms of transportation for the future, whatever that 5-10 years looks like, is my hope and my dream is that there are little boys and girls that see individuals like Rory and myself flying. Let's see individuals like ourselves leading organizations, that see individuals like ourselves succeeding, so that when they are young and they are in their formidable years, they do not see a world of limitations as Judy Heumann did. They see a world of opportunity and exploration. And until we get there, we're going to keep on fighting.
Keep on fighting.
Please give this esteemed panel a round of applause. Councilman, Dr. Cooper, Judy, David, Heather. I think this was a perfect place to end. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. Oh my God, thank you. Well, let me just say shout out to the Easterseals for a really good program and amazing partners, if I do say so myself. It has been a pleasure to serve as your moderator this afternoon. I learned a lot, and I'm going to hold myself accountable for my segment on the ADA because it seems like this is a travesty, and it's absolutely ridiculous. We're not done yet, folks, but we're almost done. Because we can't end this without hearing from Kendra yet again. So Kendra, please come back to the stage. Hopefully, you make sure you tell Comcast I did a good job, because I would like to keep my show.
You did a great job, and I knew you would. I knew you would. That's why I was so excited when you accepted this. Thank you. You did a beautiful job. Thank you. And thank you, Tracy Henderson from Comcast, for making this happen, for getting her on this stage. Thank you. Beautiful job. Incredible. Incredible. Thank you, Simone. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Williams, Advisor Buckland, and our panel of passionate advocates. They did an amazing job. And I think what they had to say was impactful and necessary and emotive. Thank you, because your candor really, really makes the messages stand out. I sincerely hope that many of you, if not all of you, come away from today's forum as energized as I am and compelled to join us as we double down on our efforts to inspire and cultivate more collaboration as we move forward to advance our collective goals. To that end, I'll be reaching out to many of you to get meetings set up, so take my call because I want to begin to identify better ways in which we can advance equity, inclusion, and access for people with disabilities, for veterans, for seniors, for caregivers, and we can do that together. I want to acknowledge and thank a lot of people because a lot goes into this. Affiliate leaders, thank you for your unwavering commitment to responding to the evolving needs of people with disabilities and providing them with innovative, quality services and powerful advocacy that we see here today. I want to thank you, Voya Financial. The report is on your table. And that report, the State of Disability Equity and Access Report, is just the starting point, but it's going to be used constantly going forward. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everyone from Voya. And thank you to the Coelho Center, because they helped us write it. Corporate changemakers, including CareSource, CEO Earhart, sitting right in front of me, thank you. And thank you to his team for being here. Can't say enough to Comcast, NBC Universal. Juan serves on our board, is super helpful. Tracy Henderson helped get us Simone, who I think just added to today's discussion in an incredible way. Your tremendous support, the tremendous support of our corporate partners, help us change and impact communities nationwide. Newer corporate partner, DeTasso, Ben, their CEO, sitting right here. Thank you. Thank you for recognizing the impact you can make in collaboration with Easterseals by joining forces with us. And I want to thank one of our newest partners, Oxygen. Oxygen just joined us. We haven't even started to do the incredible work we're going to do on ES gaming. And it is sobering to think that I went to high school with Oxygen's chairman of the board, and his sons, plural, now run the company, and we're really honored to have one of them with us today. Murph, thanks for being here. Last but certainly not least, I want to extend my personal gratitude to our partners at New Paradigm and Squire Patton Boggs. We began working with New Paradigm to reinvigorate Easterseals government relations activities in September. They introduced us to Squire Patton Boggs, and I have to tell you, I was a little skeptical about what pro bono would actually mean, and yet Squire Patton Boggs has exceeded every expectation I've had. And in particular, Peter Robertson, if you're still here, I want to extend a real thank you to you. They are our pro bono lobbyists. They're an international law firm, and I'm telling you, they are a group of the most caring people. They believe in Easterseals, they believe in our mission, and they've truly helped us. In the past 8 months, New Paradigm and Squire Patton Boggs have supercharged Easterseals' advocacy initiative, helping us effectively steward our precious resources while maximizing our impact, and we're just getting started. This week represents a turning point in Easterseals' storied and lengthy history, as we set our sights on bringing about important policy changes that will improve the lives of people with disabilities, seniors, and veterans. Both New Paradigm and SPB played integral roles in helping us bring our vision for this and future forums to fruition, and we're grateful for their constant support and assistance. While today's forum focused on unemployment, not unemployment, and transportation, it's our intention to convene similar forums focused on healthcare and education, and opportunities to work with you in developing them in the future really are important to us. So please join us. I would be remiss in not thanking the people who put all this together. I am blessed to work with a team of incredible professionals. Our Easterseals National Office did a yeoman's work to throw this together in less than 4 months. And I think they did a great job, and I'm so proud of this forum. There's no I in team, and I'm really a big proponent of collaboration, but I do have to call out 2 specific people who have worked tirelessly for the past 4 months, actually 3. Sharon Watson, stand up, please. Stand up, stand up. Robin Elefane, where are you, Robin? Stand up. These are 2 of the most humble people. And Tom Nugent. Tom worked tirelessly as well. It takes a village, and these 3 are far from the only people that have put this together, but I'm deeply grateful. And I'm deeply grateful for all of you being here. I know what a commitment it is to travel to Washington. I know what an expense it represents, but we're moving the needle. We really are moving the needle, and we're doing so together. So let's continue to work together, and I look forward to seeing you at the next forum. Thank you all very much.